10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3,
Hello, my friends in Sasquatch land. Yet again, Tuesday night. And we're here at Discover Sasquatch Studios. Tonight, we will not fail you again. We have Mr. Robert Kryder in the studio of Kryder Exploration, Surveyor, Sample Collector, Drone Recon, 3D Geoimaging, Archaeologist, Bigfoot Hunter. Very excited to have him in the studio. And tonight also, we have a special guest co-host, my partner in crime, Mr. Johnny Two Bears. Hello, Johnny. How are you?
I'm doing good. How you doing?
Good to have you here. Are you excited or what? This is what you've been waiting for.
Yeah, man. I'm pretty excited about this one.
Yeah, me too. I want to say hello to everybody in the chat. Mr. Michael Nelson Jr., Pat McGuire, Blue-Eyed Northern, J.D. Sedona, BF Buds in the house. How y'all doing? I also want to let everybody know, thank you for all the kind words. My back is healing, and I will be ready for this coming season. So we'll get that show on the road. So, without further ado, Mr. Robert Kryder. Hello, my friend. How are you?
How are you?
Yeah. Glad to have you in studio.
Oh, I'm glad to be here. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah. So, I don't even know where to start with you because you've basically been here, been there, done everything. I mean, you got a long career. You're digging in caves. You're doing everything. You're doing everything possible, and you started this all when you were like a young boy, 14 years old. I don't want to start it like every interview, but why don't you just give everybody just a little lowdown about yourself, and then we'll go from there.
Well, my name is Robert Kryder. I run a research and recovery company for about 30 years, aside from the other things we do. Also work in the movie industry, and I've worked in some aerospace development stuff early on, and everything from restaurant management to whatever. And but with the exploration company, we've mainly done research and location of sites that were just enigmatic or things that were hard to find or whatever, that took a lot of research and reasoning. And that kind of led us into the Bigfoot field.
Right. So were you ever thinking about Bigfoot before you entered into any of this, or you were just archaeologists all the way?
Oh, no. I mean, Bigfoot has always been a part of both family lore and, of course, myth and legend from most of the sites that we work on and stuff like that. So it's just a fact, it's all part of doing it.
Right. And, your first interaction with a Bigfoot was in 1995, I believe. Am I correct then?
Yeah, not the first experience, but the first time I got to see one was, in 1995. So the first time was when I was like 14, and that would have been, in the Wayback Machine. So, like 79 or something like that. So
you want to fill everybody in that hasn't heard that a little bit about it?
Yeah, that actually occurred on a mountain bike, or not mountain bike, but a BMX bike trail. I lived in Vancouver, Washington, and right outside of our neighborhood was virgin forest, basically between there and the Columbia River. Hadn't been logged, and it was, so our neighborhood had dozed into that before they built us up. So it was basically all wild. And we had a trail that ran down the mountain there, and it basically cut down into a ravine. And in that ravine, we would jump out the other side when we got into there. And I went in there one day by myself down the mountain, and sure enough, went into the ravine and flew out the other side, and something screamed at me on the other side. And that blood curdling, screaming woman bull mixed together in a barrel. And, I just did a 180 midair. I mean, I didn't even go any forward. It was like a magic trick. Went straight back into the ravine, back the other way, and took off. And I told my friends and stuff like that. But, accounts of them being up there is not that odd. So it's just, even then, it's more of a matter of fact deal. It wasn't, as if I was, someone or someplace that people weren't already used to them, and it happened, and it became a huge, big issue or anything like that. It was just kind of blown off.
So when did you get into the archaeology part of everything?
Well, I've always wanted answers, and I've wanted truth since I was a child. So I experienced a lot very early, and expected basically to, for when I was cognitive of what I was experiencing, and that in my childish vision, I assumed that as I grew older, I would experience these things in school and learn about them and all this, and it just didn't happen. And so, as the years progressed, more and more separation between, what I felt in my heart was real, of course, but the things that had validity to them. And then the more that separation occurred, the more it showed that the stories were wrong. So here we have bigger gaps. And, and as I learned more about history and I matured, the gaps didn't get smaller, they got bigger. The gaps in the biological, right down to the human development to everything else, just the gaps got bigger. So the more we learn, the more we realize that, wow, they have less and less of a story. So I wanted to know more and more of that story and fill those gaps. And then you really come to realize as an adult that there's a concerted effort to keep those gaps open. They love the what if, and it to remain a myth or a mystery, that's fine. But some things they don't want to bring to reality. So.
Right. Now, from our talk the other night, you found a lot of crazy stuff deep inside caves, and we want to reflect on any of that stuff while we're here in the archaeology.
Well, I mean, it's a pretty broad spectrum. Everything from ancient construction, down deep in the earth where it's not supposed to be, megalithic type block movement and placing and things like that, traps. We do a lot of historical stuff. So records and what people would declare as treasure, usually historical religious artifacts or pre. We do a lot of code breakdown and excavation in the sites that have megalithic monumentation. And so, we've got to see some of the stuff that's affiliated or inside. Not too long ago, my buddy Taylor came back with a picture of a crystal phallus, so basically a phallic symbol, anatomically correct with testicles or whatever, and about 8-10 inches high or whatever, but it was solid cut crystal. And they pulled that after digging out 20 or 30 feet of pack rat deposit inside of a real small crawl-in cave or tunnel in sandstone. And so God knows how many, that's thousands of years ago that was stuck in that hole. But nobody in North America should have ever been able to make that or ever use that same symbolism. But it's very, very reminiscent to back east in Europe and things like that. So, who is doing the work and things. So those are kind of things we've got a chance to see. And then we've had the chance to, usually not wanting to have it, but had the chance to experience things like technology through geoscanning and other forms of geoimaging. We'd be able to look at things that are a little off the wall. And then, of course, we've been on areas that are burned up our equipment in our hands and sucked and drained all the batteries dry, messed with the people, attract lightning strikes, stuff like that. So,
are those handpicked by you, or are you hired out by others?
Kind of both. So most of my experience came from helping others get to where they were at. And not even wanting a piece of the pie. And, I'd get paid for my day service, or I'd get paid for my consultation or tech service, and then I get to walk off. And that way I'm not caught up in all the drama that goes along with these enigmatic and high value finds is tremendous amounts of time and drama. And so to stay clear of that and to learn more. So instead of working on my own side or a buddy's or something like that and spending my whole life trying to decipher something from one perspective, I had the opportunity to get on a couple of 100 different locations and sites and glean from all of those with technology to put 2 and 2 together, So
yeah, that's pretty wild. The thing that sparked my interest was the Apache helicopter coming to blow up one of your expedition sites. I would love to hear that story.
Yeah, So that's a real controversial location that I don't really share any of the details of the actual site, but let's say that it's earth-shattering in its ramification, and until that it's properly secured and documented and find an avenue to get it out to the public correctly, we kind of keep it under wraps. And it's because we've been threatened with a lot of high-end interference, and it's not like, someone making an internet threat or whatever. This is, so for example, we would get Apaches fly in below 100 feet often, even below our eyesight on location often, and they would target us using green lasers, visible lasers, and just to mess with us. And then, it got to where the point to where we were having paramilitary groups infiltrate us at night, and this turned into gunfights and a lot of other stuff. And then those culminated with a lot of other interference. And at one point, 3 Apaches came into the canyon, and a buddy of mine was living just a half mile out of the canyon, so he actually could see them come in and hear them and everything. And he said they went down, throttled way down. He said then he heard a tremendous boom, and they all 3 throttled out of there. And then I was there within about 20 minutes of that, and they collapsed apparently the entire 200-foot section of cliff, 8 foot thick into it, 22 feet high, was shattered with no pieces bigger than 36 inches. And then some of the pieces were 2 to 275 foot away. I mean, some of the substantial pieces were 200 foot away, but other little debris was 275 foot away from where the cliff was, the whole length of it. And that's one where we were going for a chamber. These are 7 chambers that were built based on the history, we say pre-flood, and then based on the techniques that we've encountered in the ground are mind-blowing. They're like truly mind-blowing. We've had a lot of experts from like Advanced Geophysics and others on sites. These are the best in the world, and I'm just shaking their heads, asking me, could they have built this entire mesa, things like that. So, and then so those locations are considered, they're what you'd think above top secret. Mm-hmm. What's inside of them is, going to be earth-shattering. I've got lists of contents a little bit from multispectral imaging, even from the late 90s. Were giving me some contents descriptions and things like that. So pretty off the wall, those, and it still sits. We did get raided there. We got raided, daytime raids with these National Guard helicopters, 7 major agencies, including the Department of Economic Security, which I thought was pretty wild. They held everybody down at gunpoint for 3 hours and, in the dirt and blah, 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 blah. Had all kinds of guys sweating their ass off trying to figure out what all the little 300 little pink ribbons we had tied all over the place were. So.
That's wild.
I got a question for you, Robert. What, out of all the things that you've seen, if you had to, in a nutshell, what is it you think is being hidden from us? If there's one major theme that you had to stick with.
Oh, I don't think there's one. And I don't think I could focus on one other than the truth. So because and I know that sounds horribly generalized, but one of these
general
things,
question.
Yeah.
It's my fault.
No, you're good. Any one of these things leads us to potential truth or potential doorway to truth. Whether it's just make someone ask a question, if this is real, what else is real? Right. Or the question, the worst one would be if they're hiding this, what else are they hiding? So it really, of course, everyone's aware of the major things. I think Bigfoot as a whole is one of them. And I wouldn't say most of the other cryptids or anything else because of the impact in the way and form the impact can be with this creature is different than any other cryptid. They don't really want us to know that a lot of these cryptids exist because then people are going to go start looking, and then what else are they going to find? But things like, when we talk about the alien presence or whatever, that too, of course, but it's more likely because we hear the word alien presence all the time, denotes that if it's not us, then it's from somewhere else. And that's a great way just to hide the thought process of what else is in the planet, on the planet we coexist with that we don't know about. So when I call little gray an alien, but if you go back through historical period, you start looking at that description in true history, there's more history denoting that they come from beneath the ground here on Earth than they do from somewhere else. Whether or not they came from somewhere else and occupy the inside of our planet, or that they've been here all the time, and that's the story they tell to those that they encounter to hide their existence within our planet, or whatever. But I mean, so we just take historical account verbatim, it says one thing, and then if we take the popular viewpoint and say, well, I think aliens are a big secret being hidden from us, well, just that discussion keeps the other discussion off the table. So basically the truth is being hidden from us.
What do you think the push now is for our government to be releasing details and videos and stuff on UFOs right now? Is it all just a smoke screen for something else?
So this isn't even, apparently it doesn't even appear to be planned disclosure, more of the same. So they didn't release a single thing that they hadn't already released 6 months before. So, which was really interesting. So the Pentagon came out and said they had metamaterials that were made off world. It was a public release. And then during the UFO release, they released less than that they already had in the public release 6 months before. They did the same thing with the videos. So those videos, everyone had already seen them. I'd seen a couple of those 2 years ago.
Right.
So they were similar to what you'd see a TV production crew pick up, who's not in the circle of no. They go look for what was a popular vid clip, this and that, try to find something that's a little off the chart, and then they'll use that in the production. Well, we've already all seen that. So you can kind of tell it's the same thing. They're picking up production pieces, putting them together because most of the masses haven't seen or taken note, or the media hasn't pushed that yet. So it's fresh to, 98% of the masses. And that's how well they control the story. So most people do believe there was a disclosure. Was there a disclosure? Well, not really.
No. What did we learn? We didn't learn anything new.
We didn't learn anything new. Right.
The same thing we've been hearing for years.
Yeah.
A lot of it was.
Yeah, and that's kind of the deal. It's like what can we expect really? So because the administration that apparently, at least seemingly on the surface, was pushing for the disclosure is no longer in office. So why would they disclose it?
Right.
Because there was the verbiage in what they were ordered to release, they certainly didn't live up to. And no one said anything about it, right? They were allowed to not live up to it. So obviously there was going to be no recourse or ramifications. So,
Well, that's what gets me about this whole thing is that they've painted this as these ex-government insiders that are doing this great thing for society just because they're good people. Once you get up that high, you're never an ex-government insider, I don't believe.
Well, no, I mean, not to that point. You can be a whistleblower and stuff. Some people do. And it's not unheard of, but if you're going to hear about it on a major media outlet anywhere, well, then it already passed the filter, right? It already passed the test, or you're not going to hear it, period.
Right.
Not in that format. And so, so what you always have to take it with a grain of salt. Some people are also controlled and don't know they're being controlled. So that's what counter disinformation is when you release true information through either a bad source and then it looks like bad information, or you release bad information through a true source and then it looks like good information. So either one is counter disinformation. So, so who's the player? It's you never know. And so to get caught up in that, but at the same time, we all do kind of know, we all should be aware that, how few they really own all the media outlets. And if you're seeing anything on those media outlets, it obviously went through the same filter who people, conspiracy theorists, critical thinkers, whatever, are claiming, oh, they're the ones hiding it. Well, they own the studio. So why did we believe a word that we saw on top? And what we have to more realize is that there's a methodology, and it's always two lies that are truth and two truths and a lie. And we shouldn't find that disheartening. We should find it refreshing, because in that somewhere, there's always a kernel of truth. There's always one truth to two lies. And on the optimistic side, there's two truths to a single lie, and just about any story, right? So because no con works without a grain of truth, period. You can't sell a gold mine without a little salt. That means, you know, throwing a little gold in the ground. And so, or I should say, sell a fake gold mine. So what we need to do is learn how to discern through that information. And the only way to do that is learn how they're putting out information. So you have information, you have disinformation and counter disinformation. You learned what components and how often those components are used. It's going to be truth versus fiction. And believe it or not, when you keep to that methodology and you stick to that, regardless how good it all sounds, you know there's a little bit of sketch in it. And regardless how bad it all sounds, there's a little bit of good in it. So you begin to look through that filter, and you can get much faster. You can glean a clearer picture of what's going on. And that's what I'd recommend more than anybody, is to looking at any singular information, is to look at the information that holds water.
Well, that's part of.
Go ahead.
That's part of why, and I'm sure you and Chris talked about it earlier, why I guess you can call me a fan of yours, just because of the your methodology and the way you look all over the place. When I first got into this, I hadn't had a sighting yet. I had just had activity, and I was trying to find people that were credible, that weren't just, I don't know, people that I could maybe trust, that I didn't know, that the information sounded good. And you were one of those people that I came across a couple of years ago. And I told a bunch of people, hey, y'all need to look into this guy. And, eventually I kept going down the road, and I eventually had a sighting. But that's the amount of information that you're able to retain is mind blowing. I keep up with your Facebook page, and it's all over the place, man. All kinds of things.
That's kind of good and kind of bad. So my dad used to tell me, become a specialist in one thing, don't diversify too far. Mm-hmm. And I did. I diversified and threw myself all over the place. So I certainly know less about specific details about historical events and about many things. But I try to retain what it takes to make a coherent pieces to the puzzle. So in other words, like the glue to the puzzle, it's all there. And so I know, and I appreciate that viewpoint. That's great. And make me blush or whatever. But really, it's just, I really don't know that many details about that many things besides what I do. That's kind of hard to say, right? So if somebody said, well, what's the history of the Assyrians? I couldn't tell you a lot. I mean, I can tell you a lot, but it's certainly not as much as someone who's primarily into Assyrian history, right? I mean, they make me look like a fool. But what I do know is the parts that point a certain, put the pieces together for puzzles, let's say. So I'm more of a cipher compared to a code or the code reader. So you can run a code through me, and I can cipher that code or give you the clues it takes for yourself to decipher that code. You know what I mean? So that's kind of how it is. And that's kind of what I wanted to be, was a hub that brought the multifaceted unknown into one bucket, so to speak. So everyone can then begin to reach into that bucket, filter out what they can look at, what they can glean from it, which one fits their specialty, and have a new viewpoint. Because everything really is tied together. And to me, it seems simple, only because that's where my mind's been this whole time. And these are the pieces I've grabbed and to put everything together. But they are coherent. And so it may not be all the pieces, but there's enough pieces to make the coherent picture, when I guess like modern history or modern archaeology doesn't make a complete picture. They can't put the two pieces together, but you can if you use this factor or this glue. But the thing is that factor may not even be associated with that genre of study. So it may be a totally different thing. And that's where I come in. So I know so much about so many diverse things that through association, I can see a bigger picture, so to speak. I've described it this way before. So let's say myself and someone of a different discipline are both going to study a beach. The first thing that most people would do is go down to the beach. And then I wouldn't. I would want to get in a boat and get out on the ocean. And the first thing. So for one, because if I could be standing on a beach and looking down, straight down, and not know I was on a beach, I wouldn't know the difference between that and the sand dune and the Sahara. I could be looking at every single grain of sand and tell everything about every grain that's there, and it'll tell me very little about the beach I'm standing on. But I can sit back at a boat and look, and I could tell you within a very good idea what the beach is going to be made out of by looking at the mountain behind it, because I know that the erosion quality on the ocean's beating down and building a beach. So I'm looking at the whole beach as a whole, not grain for grain, and then trying to figure out if I'm on a beach. Because most of these sciences are in the unknown, are like, okay, we're both going to go study this thing. Okay, you don't know you're on a beach. You both get dropped off. Which perspective do you want? Do you want the perspective in the millimeter that you're staring at a few grains of sand? Or do you want the perspective a mile away, or like, as they say, from 30,000 feet, right? So that mile away perspective will teach you more than you could learn in a lifetime by analyzing the grains of sand themselves. And there's still no proof would be had that you got them from a beach. When the other way around, you already know it's a beach. You have that proof because you can observe it and it's there, right? So you already know that much. Then as you approach the beach on a boat, you're saying, oh, well, it's probably made of these mountains. You made these mountains. I can see from here, they're either sedimentary or they're igneous rock, or whatever, extrusive. I could see if it's a volcano. I could see all these perspectives from that distance. And I have a really good clue of what I'm going to find when I hit what I see already is a beach. Then I can use that information to weigh each grain of sand. And see, then I have, you accelerate at such a high rate. But in modern methodology is to simply know nothing, go get dropped off on the sand, stare at it from 3 millimeters away, and make a thesis, or make a theory or hypothesis of what are you on. And then that dictates how you study it. So if I get the first primary hypothesis wrong, my entire study methodology is wrong. I wouldn't study a sand dune the same way I would a beach, or sand that I felt might be on a tennis court somewhere or in a golf course trap. I'm not going to do the same study techniques. I'm not going to learn the information about what I'm actually working on. So I know it's kind of long and drawn out, but
how did you use that to, I guess, where did you start when you started looking into Bigfoot? Where was your starting point? Did you go with tracks, or what'd you start learning first?
Well, since I had experiences, and then these creatures were around at different points in times or different locations throughout the years, I already had, a basic feeling understanding, right? I mean, so when there's interaction over a period of time, like on, let's say, your treasure dig, and every night subjects coming and visiting the dig site, you begin to realize kind of how their actions are, how they're acting, what they're doing, how easy they get scared or don't get scared. The way they observe you and all these tells an awful lot about that before you ever go and try to look for what maybe made the sound or whatever. You already know that, well, whatever it is has the balls to come up within 100 feet of us, has the balls to circle us, is very shy, extremely quiet. So you learn all these traits, right? Before you ever go look to see even what it was. All kinds of things about it. So that's kind of the way we approached it. And then as well, having spotted them, in 95, filming that one. I'd already had sightings before that, but not in that area. And then so it just let in. So by the time we even began to do the actual Bigfoot research, we were pretty well primed with very little supposition, just matter of fact field experience, and things like that. So
it was kind of a byproduct of things you were already doing, huh?
Yeah, basically. Yeah. And then that's, like I said, the opinions too. And then with the exploration work, there's, when you do it for yourself and you're not working with the university, you have to develop your own methodology if you want to really get anywhere with any of that stuff. And since the historical, story and everything was just as important to me as anything else we could have ever found, I have methodology of keeping track of forming grid maps of various topographical layouts and marking where everything is and seeing its relationship. And so when we already have all these methodology bases in play from doing research trying to track down a buried loot or whatever, so it was just a shift from one to the other. Equipment as well. And now, of course, as everyone knows, over the last 10 years, I've shifted a lot of my equipment standard and things to doing the Bigfoot Enigma. We didn't require, a lot of what we use now. Of course, doing that kind of work requires other equipment. But needless to say, we still were kind of prepared to do it a little differently. So evidence collection, data acquisition, formatting, things like that was something we already did. So instead of starting on the hobby level and not logging all the data and not logging all the conditions and not doing all this work, we just started that way. And I'm going to say, I'm not, full blown anal about it. We don't do that all the time now. We do it when the information is pertinent because we already have that information. And so we're seeing, I see ourselves as exploratory science rather than, in-depth, focused study. So in other words, when we go out, I don't always log the temperature and time. But there are times when we do. And that's because each one of those events tells a different part of the story. So we do that. So.
And in my areas, when I finally figured out what was going on, I used their tracks to identify the family units. How important is that for people to notice those tracks and keep a close eye on them?
It's really important, especially through repetition. So you want to keep track of your sizes, and you want to keep track of how they're planting and which subjects running together and things like that, because that really gives you a huge idea on what they're doing, how they're moving. So, and then as well, it's not just, when we look at biped human looking feet print, that only makes up maybe 20% of their marks. So they don't usually use their whole foot. They don't usually, even when they're not quad, they're real limber. They can put a lot of pressure on any surface of the foot they want to. They often only walk on the outer edge, or they're real goofy how they'll plant. Mm-hmm. And so people, it's what's most important is that we begin to look and realize what are tracks, and then, logging that, of course. Yeah, it's a big deal, especially if you want to identify subject. So that's about the only way I know. You can suppose based on other evidence that it was this subject or that subject, but of course, a footprint's like a fingerprint, and if you have a subject in a family unit that is a 14-inch foot, and you see that same 14-inch foot with other subjects, whatever, you recognize who that is. Mm-hmm. Of course, as well, like us, it's important for people to be consistent if they're going to do the track thing, because at below 13, 14 inches, they get there pretty quick. So a foot that's 7.5 inches now, if you come back 8 months later, is probably not going to be 7.5 inches anymore. At those levels, they grow extremely quickly up to a point. And, it slows down 8.5, 9, 10 inches. It seems to slow down a little bit. And then it slows down dramatically at 13, 14, 15. And so but you see accelerated growth rate. So a lot of people are seeing tracks from the same subject. And maybe 2 years later, they go back and wow, I found a track and it's 2 inches longer. That might be the same subject. In just a few years, they can certainly, gain that much. So that's why it's important not just to note them, but to keep consistent if you really want to understand what's going on. Because if you're like counting family members in a group and you're doing that over a few year period of time, you're obviously, your count's not going to be correct, basically.
Right. Pretty interesting stuff. Yeah, the tracks definitely helped me in my area decide. And when did you figure out about the males, how they disappear? Because I would never be able to. The big guy would come around, and he had the big 15-inch track. He had the biggest out of the three that's here in Connecticut, and he would go away for, I don't know, 2 months, and then all of a sudden he would come back and you would notice his tracks again. When did you figure out where these guys were going and what was going on?
Well, it's like any other type of research or tracking is the same, whether it's in the dirt or it's looking for a satellite. So we noted how often he would be coming in different times of year. So in the fall, he would come in a lot more frequently. When we had any type of sign of an infant, like the scat from when the mother's lactating, and you get the infant scat's blue or whatever, and then we would get sounds from an infant, or we would get marking from where the female put it down. At those times, whenever there was like an infant present, the adult was usually around. The big male was usually around, and he would stay there and then leave, stay and leave. But so he was there frequently, I should say. But when that wasn't happening, spring, summer, he was very seldom ever there. And that's when, you say, okay, well, where is he? And, so we look at their step gap, and we estimate their gait and speed based on that. And that gives us potential range within such a time frame. And so we began to look, okay, well, how far could he be and be returning, let's say, every couple of days or whatever, when there's a baby around? He still goes ahead and leaves, and then he comes right back in. And that got to be within like a 40 to 60 mile range would be comfortable to move from point A to point B, point A to point B. So because we know he wasn't there during these long periods, we looked elsewhere to find where he was basically going. And then what we found was that the smaller mountains and hills and things that were within 4 or 5 miles were occupied by the younger adults, and that would have a foot anywhere from 15 to 17, 18 inches. And then they would occupy a region not too far away from the family group. And we would notice that year round, they would come into the family group, and then they would actually be hitting farms and places like that in between where they ranged, where they were alone, and then where they'd come to the family group. So we saw raiding avenues that were across that and raiding activity. And then, but the big male, he was going to, I should say, the only place we saw a sign of them other than the family units was in the very, very high mountain, where they were getting up to where, 8 to 10,000 foot, extremely rugged, major hazards between you and where they were. So they would get into places that nobody's at. There's no trails, extremely limited access, if there's any access at all. Places you could climb to, but certainly nowhere you could take a horse or mountain bike or the average hiker, and stuff like that. So then we would see sign of not just one, but multiple, which was interesting because you could go everywhere else and not see sign of these big monster guys. But then you get into that region and you see multiple sign of them. And then we also found sign up there as small as 16-inch foot, but nothing smaller than that, except where one little family group was occupying the lower edge of an area adjacent to that range, right on the lower flank of that range, not too far from an affluent housing area that has a bunch of ponds and all kinds of cool stuff. So, and we actually found rocks from the landscaping from the houses up on the mountain being used for crushing stone. So, which was really cool because we know they got it out of the landscape rock down there and brought it up.
Now, I remember you telling that story. I believe it was on Sasquatch Chronicles. Kind of going into that a little bit. Can you go into detail a little bit more? Did somebody hire you to go into that affluent area, or did you just? I remember you saying something like you told somebody about it and they weren't happy to hear.
Yeah, actually,
information or whatever.
Yeah, Oxford University had requested that we'd already submitted samples to them, and they came back as unknown. And then no recoverable DNA because they were the outer hair strand, no follicle, but they were unknown and hollow shaft, chestnut brown, the whole 9 yards. And they came from a collection at 10,000 foot in the snow on a pile of fresh deposited pinon nut scat, with a shelter about 100 feet away made out of really giant trees. And so, we knew what it was from. And then what they wanted, they took it serious, and they wanted us to get a specimen or a sample off a living specimen. So they wanted something that basically was fresh, if we could, within maybe hours of deposition. And so we were already doing a little bit of study work up there at that location. And then I had a report of the big male of that little unit there grabbing a dog off the trail from this guy. And I figured, well, and then my other buddy was in the same area, and they had run into where they had, the big male had left some prints and bite imprints and some yucca fruit that had been carried up the mountain. And then an area where they were crushing bone with a rock. And so when Oxford, we were studying above this area on the top of the ridge area up on top. So we weren't in like a family occupation. We were in transient travel zone doing our work, most of it. And so when we got the other reporting lower down, we went ahead and went in there to go ahead and get our sample recovery for Oxford. And we were able to get that one. He was observing us as we were going up the mountain, so we were able to get him maybe 15 to 30 minutes off of him. So it still had a hydrated follicle. So, you know, it came right off him quick. And that was like a 6 or 7 inch gray hair. And he's missing quite a few teeth by his bite imprint. And he's really, really big, 22 to 23 inch feet, 16 inch long hands. So
massive.
A monster.
Yeah, that's where he's big. He's
so
big.
When you were around him, when he's around his family, was he ever aggressive? Did he ever charge, or did he ever throw boulders or anything like that when you were near the family unit?
We've had rocks thrown and stuff like that, but when they retreated when we went up. They moved up the mountain, so we never ever put them in a position to have to act like that to us. But when the first group went up there and found the bite imprints and stuff, they took an Akita dog, who the guy's a climber. He climbs all the time. Dog goes all the time, and the dog locked up, went between his feet. Then they caught whiff of it. They had to carry the dog off the mountain, ruin the dog. Dog won't go out anymore. So that they considered that threatening, but not that subject, because he wasn't there. They had retreated up mountain when we got. They were still there somewhere, and then at that same location during the time they were experiencing, you know, a football-sized rock came over a big rock bluff that was above them. They were at the bottom of a protrusion, and a rock flew over the top of that and landed right by them, football-sized. And then at the parking lot, at the base of the mountain, I'm sure there's reports on this. It can be looked up. There was a woman in that parking lot who got hit by a basketball-sized rock in the head, and flat ground at the parking lot right below where they come down. And so I'm sure she probably surprised a female or something, and it went bad. But she didn't die, put her in critical condition in Albuquerque there. And then they never mentioned that again. And then that big male, like I said, snatched a dog right in front of this other guy who reported to us. Had 2 dogs with him, and a pit and a lab, and the lab was out front on the trail, and a big hand just came out and grabbed the lab. Blink, gone. And lab screaming, went up the mountain, and he took the pit back home, got so upset he went back and followed it and tracked it out and found the remains, you know, the dog hanging or the head and spine hanging in a tree, just up the trail. So you know, not aggressive with me.
You think they're eating them?
Probably, yeah. Yeah, and he's like, we know that male's really old, because where he's at, what he's doing, he's hanging with a family group. He's cooperative hunting with a couple of smaller subjects with thin feet, which are most likely to be female. He's having them drive game to him, and then he used a rock to take out the game. So instead of like their more agile tactic is usually to do ambush and just grab the game. Not use projectiles and stuff for big game. That's what we normally see. We don't usually see them throwing 150-pound rocks at a deer that's 20 feet away, because usually they can close that gap and just snatch the deer. And then by the hair we saw, like I said, was solid gray, 6-7 inches, and then we see the teeth imprint missing quite a bit of teeth. So we would assume this is a very aged individual. And then the feet print I have from him are not thick padded and heavy like a fat boy would have. Basically, they're very tenuous and skinny like an old man would have. So
as you progress down the line, how am I going to say this? Where do you stand now compared to where you standed when you first started your pursuit?
In what regard? Like my thoughts toward them, or our
in regard to the whole
or
the government, them, everything into one?
Overall, basically the same thing we already knew about the truth and the way it's being kept from the people. I always regarded them as a people themselves. That the study and the research didn't change that. It only served to basically reassert that. So not much has changed since the beginning in that sense. There's been surprising finds and discovery along the way, certainly that wasn't expected.
Like what?
Well, like their interaction with people, why they would bother a lot of times. Right. They're where they are. So, and how close they'll come to you and how little we actually know they're there when they are there. Things like that.
Actually kind of scary
Yeah. I mean,
How
people
close
think they'll
they
come,
can
you
get.
know, oh, they'll come 100 feet from you. Won't be scared, man. We've caught them 8 foot, 10 foot. So
I love it. I
and not
absolutely when
not
they
announcing their presence.
throwing pebbles at me and knocking on the tree, letting me know that they're right there. I just love it. That part.
Mhm.
I
Yeah,
love
absolutely.
that.
Yeah, the
Why-
scary part is when they're not letting you know they're there, but they're there.
All right. Well, what do you think? Why do you think that the government shelters these guys? Why do you think they don't recognize them? Why?
Because they're people. So there's a lot of reasons, but imagine just right off the bat, what if they're people? What if they're a tribe of people? When we say people, that's really loosely. We're not talking about necessarily even modern human. What about a different kind of human? What if Denisovan or Neanderthal still existed today? They would be a different kind of people. They have culture. They had death ceremonies. They had art. We know Denisovan, created nano-polished, translucent stone jewelry. Beautiful stuff. So what happens when we say, okay, they're people? If it was a creature, an animal, an ape, or anything else, it wouldn't really intimidate anybody. It would a little bit, the zoological science or this and that, or migration habits, and it might throw a few things into question, but no big deal. But if you throw a people or a relic hominin of some type that still exists, either one, then it throws a lot into it. So I usually go to on the outside. We live in a very complex world, and it's very tedious, and it has a lot of fences and barricades and barriers that we all have to work around and work through. We call it red tape, we call it whatever. And a lot of these things regulate where we live and where we can walk and what we can do, or where we can fish, what we can hunt. The Bigfoot is an expression of freedom to people who think they're free, that you really don't need. So when a caged man, if his cage is big enough and comfy enough, he may not even realize he's caged if he was born into it, until he looks outside the cage and sees some guy walking around out there, and he just walks off and over the horizon. Then you realize you're in a cage. And so to show an expression of a people that actually is free to a bunch of people who you tell them they're free, but you're not quite free enough to go over here, not without buying a permit to do this. No. You're not free to build a house there. You're not free to build it the way you want to, or even paint it the color you want to. But yet here's a group of people living as nature and God intended, out there doing their thing in spite of us. And so that's an expression that you really don't need other people to show. You don't need other people to see that, because then you're going to ask, wait a second, if he can go over there and live on the mountain and hunt the mountain, why in the hell can't I? He's a person. He's a people. And then in the very same rate, though, you have the religious and the economic reasons, which represent, collectively, globally, trillions of dollars. If you really went down that line and tried to break it all down, certainly hundreds of billions. And then as well, you have, where do they fit in the tree? So what does that say about science and its declaration of how we got here, what we are? Those things go out the window. But I think one of the biggest ones now, they've got themselves painted into a corner. They couldn't admit it if they wanted to, because UFOs and aliens, it's easy, because you can always say, well, we didn't know. They're so advanced, it's so crazy. How could you expect us to know? Well, Bigfoot's not quite like that. The Department of Natural Resources, Department of the Interior, Department of Agriculture, U.S. Forest Service, and all these others, they should know, right? Academia, all the biologists, hundreds of thousands they should know. So if it's real and you then show that, what's it make them? It either makes them incompetent or makes them liars, right? So which one is it? Nobody wants to be incompetent. Nobody wants to be caught in a lie. Mm-hmm. So where are they at now?
I don't think that the government has anywhere near the control that people think they do, especially over these things. That my partner that I do the podcast with, his sighting was on a military rifle range, and his was one of 4 between 4 years ago and I believe the 70s. But when he had his sighting, there's one of the largest NSA facilities in the U.S. right down the street from that range. These things are coming and going at will. They do whatever they want.
Right.
I mean, to make your point, I mean, they're on military bases, and there's nothing our government could do about it.
Right. And there's a lot to say about all of it. And that's true. Of course, at the same time, you know, he's a guy, he's not, how do I say this? So let's say something goes through the sensor net and you know it's not a person, you know it's not a threat. What do? Nothing. Deer go through them every day, elk go through them, bear go through them, everything else. They're the guys that are in charge of the sensor net are in charge of the information or making a decision on what to flag and what not to flag. If they're aware of them, they're not going to flag them anyway. So when we talk about them getting onto a military base, well, nobody's stopping them. You know, there's nobody out there to stop them from. Why would they? All you do is create havoc and upset your own action and operation. If you realize that they're a point of life or a fact of life, what you're going to usually do is practice with them. You know, you're going to try to make it where they can't sneak up on you so much. And so it's like that. I don't see, you know, people. That's why people say, well, if they knew they were out there, they would tell us. And people do tell us all the time. But you notice it's never anyone that ever has the authority to make the decision whether or not you form a response on base that's coming up and saying, well, I decided not to send my team out there when we saw this. You know, those point of views we're not going to get, because those guys who get those jobs aren't going to say anything to anybody about them. That's why they got those jobs. You know, I see it in a lot of different ways, and maybe from a little broader perspective and point of view. Anything around military bases, anything within 100 miles of a DARPA research facility or anything else, I begin to question all of it at that point. Because and when I say that, it's like, even if I gain evidence, well, I'm still going to have to factor in that I gained evidence near a top secret DARPA research facility. How could they be playing into this evidence? Could they be involved in it? Could they be steering it, keeping it from anyone knowing? Could they be ignore it? Could they be apathetic toward it? Don't give a rat's ass, you know? So, but there's still a factor there. And I know that Chris and I had spoke about, you know, I don't know if now's the time to get into that or not, about what things possibly could be that we're witnessing. So, because naturally we should have Bigfoot sightings on military bases. Every other critter's out there. They're watching all the time. So that should occur. And then what should not occur also occurs, like what we discussed is, you know, stories of when a Bigfoot runs up, breaks 4 levels of security and runs up to the concrete wall and looks dead in the security camera. And then they say, well, you know, that's amazing. It's amazing. He broke all levels of security and looked in the security camera. Well, yeah, but, you know, let's factor in reality. So why would a Bigfoot do that? And what's the pretense that that's just not military, doing that to military, using the Bigfoot as their excuse to do it, testing their own systems on their own, because that's what they do. Right. So the possibility exists that they're using the Bigfoot enigma and the Bigfoot look and the Bigfoot creature as a form of cover for other forms of operations, like recon or intelligence gathering. It's a no-brainer to do these things, really, because the technology's existed since the 80s. You know, they're not showing it to us on the front door every day, but they showed all the pieces of it since the 80s to us to create them from scratch if we wanted to, and have them out there right now running around in robotic form that you can't tell the difference. Like, they make dolphins right now that you cannot tell. You can get in the water with them and you can't tell the real dolphin from the fake dolphin. They make them right now. And they've been able to make these for 30 years. So when we look at that edge of it, we think we don't want to believe that. We don't want to factor that in, but we actually have to if we're going to do tree research. Is what else could it be? So we always have to lay that down with it. And what I've noticed is some of the traits that we see happening, so to speak, are more consistent with DARPA research projects stuff than it is a living creature. And I know they're living creatures because I've been around them too much. And I know they can't just step into another reality at will, because I've seen them have diarrhea. I've seen them puking, you know, through the evidence. We've pushed them into a corner where they could not get away. And they've reacted as an animal who cannot get away, not as something that has a motive out. of this world, basically, so to speak. Not to say that they couldn't do that. There's been people in history that have been able to dematerialize from one place and rematerialize in another place. And it's been, no one knows how, it's not scientific, but it's been documented. The same thing has happened in scientific atmosphere. Animals have vanished from lab surroundings, and with no way in the world they could have got out of their containment, just gone. So who's to know what can really happen? But I think that we also have to factor in when we see something matrixing, going stealth, cloaking, what are we watching doing this? And if they can, then how come that one can do it and this one can't? Because certainly every time we've ever put them in that position, they've never been able to do that. Right. But at the same time, you're talking, well, what about it? Do we ever factor in that we may be seeing an imitation of a Bigfoot that can do that, that has that technology built into it? And then what would be the reasoning anyone would have to do that? And I know that, and I can't be the only one, that if I was behind research projects and intelligence gathering, and with the type of technology that they've advertised they've had for 30 years, I would have built a Bigfoot or a mech suit to go and do recon in China and Russia and all these places where they have the Yaren, and they have all the same animals, the Kaptar and everything in northern Russia. They have all the same animals there. They have Bigfoots everywhere. So what is it when you see something run up to your military base and look in your camera? So if it happens here and we assume it's okay and we go, oh yeah, that was a Bigfoot that did it, what are they going to do in Russia? Go, oh yeah, it was a Bigfoot that did it. Well, hell, it could have been a U.S. personnel inside of a mech suit, or it could have been an automaton, an avatar of another personnel sitting in a pillbox over there running the thing remote. We don't know this. And it's actually more likely when you talk about breaking 4 levels of military security and going to a concrete wall, only because what in the world would a Bigfoot have interest in? You know, sure, if they got a dumpster in there and there's a cafeteria, which they have, you know what I mean, they're everywhere, and they got a dumpster and they keep chucking out good smelling stuff, yeah, they're going to break your 4 levels of security in a heartbeat and probably never get spotted. But they're not going to run up to the concrete wall and stare in a security camera. They don't care about a concrete wall and security camera, right? I mean, so what's most likely? What is that most likely? And if it's not one of our DARPA projects, then who's to say it's not China or Russia infiltrating our damn bases with the same type of tech, which is outlandish. And then you can, if you want, Chris, since we got onto it early, you can throw up that shot, and I'll kind of give you an example. This was something that was posted just online somewhere. And it was claimed that it was, a photo of a Bigfoot in the bush. I did an image search on it. I couldn't get any more information from it. But what I can tell you right now is that doesn't look like a mechanical device. It does not look biological. It's either a complete fake, where it's a puppet, it's a mannequin, or because that's not even somebody in a suit, unless it's some form of mech suit. And what Chris just popped up just now, 2 circles, and what we see on top is a standard headlamp. Yeah, and on the side it's a camera. And I don't know if you copied that other image, Chris, of the camera type. I
can put those up.
Yeah, I could actually open them, but if we want to. But the camera model, we could show you the camera model that they actually have. I could see right now. So let's see if. Oh no, I wanted me to do that slideshow. That's right. Well, let me do just single picture. But regardless,
it's a thermal that they use on drones, is what it is.
Yeah. And so they make 2 styles, those dual lens rigs, and you can actually look at the body of it and tell which style it is. So here you've got this. I'm going to pop that picture back up, Chris.
Yeah.
Here you've got this thing that looks. I mean, you tell me at 200 feet. Through the woods and the trees, you're going to look at this thing and say Bigfoot, and you're going to swear to your grave you saw a Bigfoot. And when you look at the eye color here, you can see the red tint to red eyes, and so it's kind of like, wow, he had glowing red eyes, or he matrixed. Well, we have the technology. We've had it for 30 years now, ability to broadcast whatever's on the back of something on the front side of it. And it's going to look just like predators standing there in the trees, or it's going to appear to vanish from your eyes altogether at a certain distance or under certain conditions. But my point being is there's a photo here of something what is it? It's wearing standardized technology, obviously some form of mask or face or whatever it's got. But then you look at the body form, and Chris did some light blasting and stuff on it, and it's not hair per se. It appears to be fibrous when we look at the outline here in the sun, and we can see the type of pixelation stuff does look like it's a fuzzy type thing. But when you really bring the light onto it, you realize it's really not. It's a consistent covering, let's say, to speak.
That was snake skin.
Yeah, it almost looks like a snake skin.
Right.
So when we look at stuff like that photo, though, then we have to question, well, wait a minute, man, what did I see? And so people only have to associate what they have. The rest is what you call recondite. It's unknown. The brain doesn't have a way to factor or associate it. It's certainly not going to think of it because it's unaware of the information. But I do believe that we need to look a little deeper and bring all these things to the table and say, okay, it's not even what's likely and not try to make a conclusion. It's just, let's put everything in brackets where the brackets go. And they'll all come together. The pieces will all fit together when we get done. You often make a puzzle, a 2,000 piece puzzle. What do? Do you just keep putting one piece to one piece to one piece? No, you actually select like-minded pieces, and you start building little cells inside the frame, right? I found all the red ones. And then, so you got a barn roof sitting there by itself for an hour while you put together other pieces, and then you can fit the barn roof in. That's the way we need to approach this. Mm-hmm. And people aren't doing that. They're grabbing one piece and going from the outside in and putting one piece and one piece. And and they can't see all the information. They don't even know where all the pieces are. They haven't even got them all out of the box yet. So
it makes me question now that we're getting RF readings on our meters when these guys are around us throwing stones at us. Now talking to you has got me thinking a whole different way now. I
don't mean to change your conclusion or even force you to make a conclusion, right? It's just, how about let's just have another eyeball open and go, okay, well, what the hell is that then? Right. Really, and we still don't know what else is sharing our planet with us. Yeah, there's a lot of variance, and then you can talk about demonic entities, you can talk about ghosts, you can talk about a lot of things that can form apparitions, values, do things, cause effects on us. From the supernatural to the technological, you get high AM readings. You can make a person see things. Now, like we talked about on the privately, Chris. They're now bragging about the technology to be able to record dreams or to put a dream in your head, put the visions in your mind. If they can do that to your dream, they could do it to you with you awake and fully conscious, and you wouldn't know the difference. So everyone really needs to just step about 3 steps back and say, okay, how many things am I compiling into one aspect here? A Bigfoot researcher tends to see Bigfoot in everything they research. And these are personal preferences and opinion and interests, and they're actually coloring the outcome. And it's not getting easier to bring understanding. It's becoming more difficult. That takes us back to, wow, is this a concerted effort to make it difficult? Is someone throwing in a lot of these things and helping them along and pushing the interpretation one way or the other, just a little bitty bit, enough that people can run with it, just enough to where they can't settle down and find that common truth? And that's really what it looks like what's going on. That's what I believe anyway.
Wow.
Well, what in a simple, when you go into an area, do you just start with local? If you're going to pick a new area to go see if you think there's Sasquatch in the area, what do you start with? Just local sightings, or just something looks good on a map? What do you do?
Yeah, usually I'll just assess the area. So I need to find out certain information. I usually don't even go off sightings or anything else, to be honest with you, because they are what they are. They're basically randomized events that could have happened anywhere within the coverage area of a Sasquatch in a territory. Happens to be where a person was at the time. So as far as if you're going to go find one, yeah, it helps a little bit, and you can use those factors, but you can actually do better by using known knowns. So things that have already been tested and true. When I go into a new area, I'll automatically look at specific points of interest to see first if they're doing the things in the same way that they're doing them at other locations, so that I have some basis, right, to predictably move forward. If they're not doing them the same way, then I like to try to figure out how they're achieving the same thing. So if a subject wants to go through an area and say, okay, this is where I went through to the next following subject, or if a family group wants to mark, here's where we are today, to another subject that may want to come in. So we'll try to find how they're going to do that everywhere. So, but how are they going to do it? And how are they going to get that message and point across? So the first thing to do is usually go and establish where everything is. So where's a creek bed? Where's a river bed? Where's a canyon? Where's the dense foliage? Where's routes of travel that are unmolested or secure, safe? And then it gives you an overall. And then you're going to look within that overall at the known places where we should find A, B, or C. And then we declare, do we find A, B, and C? And if not, why not? And then through that methodology. So it's the same thing as approaching the beach from the ocean. And in detail, like in Michigan, we went up there, there's several things that we need to look for regardless of where we're at anyway. And so the topography and everything up there was so much different, 1,550 miles away from here in the UP of Michigan. You know, it's got rolling sand-based topography, very little elevation changes, a lot of swampy, thick woods. And we do have regions that are like that here, but the foliage and all the trees are different and all that. So what we do is we take what we see in other places, we go up there and say, okay, well, here's deciduous forest, a little bit of pine mixed in. What do they do where we know, and what's it going to look like? So what we looked for there were like flags, what I call flags. So it's just where they've broken down new growth, usually 8 or 10 foot high. And there's a couple of kinds. There's snaps, and then there's flags. So flags is usually going to be something that's leafy, that you can obviously tell wilts, and you can see the rate of wilt. So, and they'll do that because that's a time indicator when that thing was broken. And all you got to do is look up and see it. And they'll make these flags at entry points to travel. And then they'll make these little smaller snaps along the travel corridor. And so like we went up there, they were different than what we find because they don't have the same type of foliage to work with up there, but they certainly were doing it. And we were able to get right on track immediately. And, you know, this is in the complete absence of any sign on the ground. So it doesn't matter if they're managing to leave feet print or not. We generally don't track anything by the feet print. We've found a lot of prints because we track them through this. And then on the routes of travel, we're going to find prints, hand prints, knuckle prints, edge of hands, feet, because they are moving through there. See, so, but, you know, that's kind of.
How did you pick before you even got there, how did you pick the spot?
Well, up in that location, I just talked to Blake, and base camp, second camp, they had picked a location that was remote in the UP, kind of right off a highway where a cabin was, but it was adjacent to a lot of open land, a lot. Or it's dense forest, but what I mean is no roads or anything. We were at least 1,000 acres uninterrupted right behind us. And so I asked Blake basically, where's the water holding? Where's the south side of the water holding? Where does the water come in and go out at? If the water goes out on the south side, you're likely to have a warmer, swampier region, and that's going to be a lot more food resource that's year-round. So what we look for is reed beds and things like that. And he said, oh, well, there's a place over here called like Moose Lake or whatever it was called, because all the moose go hang out in the swamp. So it means that there's a lot of shallow vegetation, basically. And so I said, well, on the south, he said on the south end, that's where the water drains out. I said, or whatever, but the point was, where are the reed beds and where's the solar exposure? So that's dry land just adjacent to that. So you want the south side because you're warmer than you are on the north side, basically at certain times of year when they need to be. And so it can be vice versa depending on where the temperature is. So if they want to stay warm, want to stay cold. But so what I did was ask for that. So, and then I said, well, then they're going to have a family habitation unit somewhere within, a mile or two, somewhere dense, extremely thick, that has easy access to that permanent water and reed beds. Because up in Michigan, your food sources year round are depleted tremendously. But you can always go get the roots to the reeds and just munch those down. You can always find food underneath those in the forms of clams, in the forms of other things that are still active beneath the reed bed. And so, that's just something we know basically is they've got to have a food source. They have to have a water source. They have to have high dense cover. They're going to usually be in a zone where in the wintertime it stays a little warmer. In the summertime, it stays a little cooler. And so we just did it that way. And that gave us our overall. And then we developed the camp like 8 miles in. I think it was 8 miles in. And tried to get in virgin material where they could approach without making noise. So if you're going to go somewhere and you've got tons of leaf scatter all over the place, well, don't expect to have a super lot of activity because they're not dumb. What you want to do is go somewhere they can sneak up within 10 feet of your tent and you don't know they're there. And that's what we did. So we provided them an avenue to come in close to us by, for one, like I told those guys, let's go be a pain in the butt to the group. So when you get within a certain distance to a group, it has to come see who you are. It has to come send subjects over there to watch you, survey you, see if you're going to present a danger to the group. So they're not very scared of themselves, but they damn sure watch everything when it comes to a family group. So we pick a geographic region that should have a family group. We go to where they're most likely at. We look for some sign. We set up where they can get in on us in a region that's close enough that they feel the need to, right? And then we start, then it gives us the rest.
Perfect.
So basically, years and years and years of experience and knowledge is how you pick your spots.
Yeah, I mean, but it really goes down to logic, and research. So when people look at a map of an area they're going to go, do they ever really look and say, well, where's the clusters of acorns, or where is a seep that looks the deep and dark thing, and where's a highway and then it's got a cliff between it. That, so you just have to look and think that way the whole time, not just like, oh, where's a good place to camp? Because if you're going to look for a good place for you to camp, the likelihood is
then you're just going camping.
You're going camping. Exactly. You got to look where they are and then go camp there, and so people have it's a different approach, I guess.
Baby steps.
Baby steps.
Baby steps. I got a question here from one in the chat. Do they abduct people as some people think? 411.
Everything we've ever, I don't know, I haven't watched it, but yeah, everything we've ever seen, I would say, yeah. That's going to be my opinion. I don't like sharing opinion very much. I'd much rather share what we know, but yeah, I would assume so. That's if it quacks like a duck, right? Then it's a duck. If it's just the way it goes. So whatever is the most plausible is probably the truth, and it's most plausible that something out there is doing this. With our experience, we know that there's a creature like that out there, and knowing that the most plausible creature to be doing it or thing to be doing it would be them, at least in specific examples. Yeah, or no shoes, and declothe them a couple 100 yards, and they're found on the other side of terrain they could not have got to. You got a 60-year-old woman with no shoes on, ends up on the other side of a mountain where climbers are having a hard time getting to her. Stuff like that. We've seen that kind of crap that's never been reported to the Bigfoot community. The Sandia Mountains above Albuquerque are full of those stories. Every year we get a person or two into those conditions. They're never logged.
Yellowstone is big time too.
Yeah.
Has your drone given you good specific evidence of Sasquatch?
Yeah, it has. It's difficult with a drone because even running the props we run, which are really quiet, they still, they know it's coming. So, but I've caught eye shine in the daytime as they're looking up out of the trees to see it, and you get some reflection off the sun, and that's pretty dramatic. But usually for tracks, and we have been able to find quite a bit of track evidence and activity evidence from the air, and then go in later and do the final tracking. So on our YouTube channel, we've got a video called Tracking the Giants, and we actually show part of the drone recon video where we spot the tracks from the air, and they're tough. It's hard to see them, especially if you have cattle and stuff like that walking around. But we show it, and then we go on the ground and actually do the field investigation. So yeah, the drone's paid off, and I've caught the female with the drone, shrugging behind a tree where there's almost no cover at all. But I didn't see her when I was doing the flight because she's off to the extreme right of the frame, and she looks a lot like the shadows that are there. But so it's her. We went back the next day, repeated the thing, looked and found her tracks, and found where she messed up everything, where she sat, and all that stuff. So it does pay off. Yeah, absolutely. It's difficult. I mean, a lot of flying hours with nothing.
Yeah. If you guys don't know, you should go over to his YouTube channel and definitely subscribe, because he has some great videos. Like Kryder Explorations is the YouTube channel, right?
Yeah. It's KX Kryder Exploration. Or you can just do YouTube/Kryder Exploration.
Yeah, I've watched that. With the Waking the Giant, is that Waking the Giant? That video, I've watched that about 100 times, and hear that guy crashing and those trees just snapping in half while that thing's running. Mm-hmm. And you're like, he's only 30 feet away from me, and I can't even see him. Just crazy stuff.
Yeah. That one was pretty rugged.
Yeah, big trees, man. He's going. Yeah. I don't know if I could have done that. I think I would have never even pursued.
I mean, I'm cursed with curiosity, but at the same time, I think you can see the inner battle. So I was in a hell of an inner battle. I almost went ahead and crawled in. I don't know if I'd have been here. So, and it's just that constant voice. It's like, you go one more foot, you're not going to make this. So, but that curiosity thing too, it's like, what are you going to do? How are you going to walk away? They're right there. This is what I've been working for. To me, it'd be like going to the moon. And, once you get orbited around the moon, you're not going to get in the lander and go to the moon. What was I thinking? So it's just kind of like, well, I have to, I'm here. I got to go. This is what I came for. But, even then, no matter what, I couldn't push it beyond a certain point. I tried everything I could to make myself do it. And I think that's right to the point of being grabbed. When you're getting arm distance and stuff. So, and being alone, but at the same time, would I have been able to continue that interaction that long if I had somebody with me that gave me the advantage? They obviously had 100% of the advantage the entire time. Me backed up to a dirt wall I can't even climb over, and them right there. So I think that kept it going, because they could have bolted out the back. They really, if they wanted to, they could have gone. I might have got a flash view of them, but they could have left. So.
Yeah. So awesome.
I haven't watched that video yet. Is this a group you've been around a lot?
Oh yeah. So 10 years, 6 years, real heavy. Group. Okay. Yeah. And then, but this is the first time that I ran into the big male. So it took 4 or 5 years just to find his prints. And then it was like 8 years before we found the second set, and this was the day after we found his prints. And then, I just accidentally ran into him. So I was in there with another guy, but the guy left after about the first 45 minutes and left me in there alone. And then of course, that's when I'm going to gosh damn walk right into the bastard. So it was like I was 57 feet when he realized I was there and sprang up and awake. It's pretty explosive. It was incredible. So
yeah, but why do they run? I mean, they're twice the size of you. They could just snap your neck and go back to sleeping if they wanted to. I don't understand that part. That's the part that gets me. They're so big and so powerful, but it's like they don't want to hurt the people. They've obviously seen you, and they obviously know you after 7-8 years. So I mean, I'm sure he's seen you time and time again.
Well, I don't know if the big male had ever seen me or was in there when we were in there. I assumed so at night a few times when we used to go in at night. And we knew he was around, but I don't know, we just don't know, because it's only the second time I was ever, seen any evidence of him at all. Certainly the first time I was near him. And the entire dynamic was different, completely different. So usually they don't even take off. Usually they just hang around and get in cover, and I sit down or mess with them and hang out, Like I said, the pitch pebbles, do little whistles, and it's an enjoyable thing. They try to ghost me. I always try to get me back between me and the river, and I always go back and cut them off. So it's kind of this little thing. And but yeah, that day was completely different. Even the subject I'd been around a lot, he acted completely different around his dad. So he was boisterous and confrontational, and was willing to go right there to it, with dad standing there watching. And it's the same dynamic as even dogs, do that. So it's the same dynamic. It's like, oh, dad's here, I'm going to be a tough guy. And but normally that subject's real cool, So why they run? They don't always run. So most of the time we've seen, even in evidence where people think they disappeared, we've been able to see where they've gone, turned, hid, and be right there. And the people swear they're gone, and they're not gone. They're right there. They're just good. They don't run out of fear. If they run, they're putting distance between you and them for whatever reason they chose. But it's not panic fear. So they're really, really good at that. But they can certainly make you think they left the area, which is, and I mean, maybe they do. But.
And it sounded like a little Volkswagen coming through the pines, and then all of a sudden it was just done. It just snap, coming right at us, and then all of a sudden quiet and nothing. Where it came from, you can't see where. Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah, that's them. And they make us feel like kids out there, and we should.
Yeah.
Blow our doors off, man. And they love to brag about that. I mean, that's their thing. It's like anything else, man. Cats do the same thing with prey, that even that they don't kill sometimes. Like they just want to just show their prowess. I'm the badass.
We got a question here. Have you ever found evidence of birth?
Vicariously through scat and action. So we've never seen an infant. I didn't see an infant being born, but we certainly have noted the behavioral patterns of the female change dramatically at time, and then gone in and twice now, several years apart, been able to recover or to find the blue scat. And it always eludes me. There's a name for that material, and I can't remember what it's called now. So it's basically infant poop that's blue or greenish because of the lactating mother.
Is it called poop?
Huh?
Nothing. I said we're called Smurf poop.
Yeah, but that tells us that there's lactating and breastfeeding and that activity, and then we'll see. How would you say? So the female will be occupying these cells in zones that are really, really dense and not moving around much. Like normal, they would be here and then a few days and then go way the hell downriver, be a few days. They'll be kept to a tighter spot. And I think that's all evidence of a birth, because it all happens kind of the same time. So, but that's pretty much it. It's all vicarious.
Nice. You got any more questions for Rob, Johnny?
Let me check here. I wrote a list, and I want to make sure I got the. I think we just about covered everything, man.
That's all. Let me tell you, Rob. I'm starstruck right now. Just all the information that I've retained, and the two times I talked to you personally and then heard this tonight, it's just unreal. If you guys want to approach an area and get your stuff going, I advise you to go check out everything that Mr. Kryder has to offer and follow it, because he knows what he's talking about. I have a lot of stuff in common with him that I have found over the years, and I just met him, and it's just awesome stuff. And so definitely check out Mr. Kryder's, and I will link everything for you all tomorrow in the description when the video posts.
I do. Actually, I have one more thing.
No, you can't ask it. I already asked you.
No, it's about a presentation he did. It was from a while ago. I don't know if it's still up. It was actually, the audio wasn't very good, but
you're thinking the presentation to MSR. Or it was actually done to a group called the New Mexicans for Scientific Reasoning, which are made up of ex and present scientists from our defense laboratories and medical and biologic and zoologic guys from UNM University. And,
well, Chris needs to find that and put that up, and everybody needs to watch that. That was one of the first videos I watched of Mr. Kryder, and whenever you start seeing the level of research that he's doing, it's just very impressive. I suggest everybody watch that video.
Yeah, because that was in response to a news agency doing disinformation, and then it actually culminated in them almost filing charges and for fraud for doing our research, and then a state senator tried to push law to block our research in the state, so at the university level. So it got pretty hot. That's because what was going on with the UNM stuff, University of New Mexico Gallup. And so I actually did that to address what the disinformation that the local news had done. So it demonstrates the efforts they'll go to keep the lid on it when you get too close.
Yep.
I do have one more question. Are you still looking for members of that team to go back up to the nest?
Yeah, to the lodge area. Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, I would think Johnny will sign up for it.
Yeah, I forgot that was the main question. I actually wrote that one down as a joke, but yeah, seriously, if you ever put that back together again,
yeah,
I'd definitely like to go up there.
Well, I'd love to. As soon as we get snow melt around 8,000 up there, then I'd love to. The thing is, I'm basically open anytime, and what I've found is, other people, they want to go. But when it comes down to actually getting to New Mexico, getting in the field and all that, there's usually whatever happens in between all that. So, you guys talk to me on the backside, and if you're serious, we'll just arrange a deal.
Oh no, I'm definitely not going to miss that. I want to see that. Just even if nothing happens, I want to see that.
Yeah, access is a little rugged, and it'll probably have to be an overnight. I mean, whether or not we want to be in, there's kind of a safe zone. With the right team, I think it could be done correctly and not too dangerously. I don't even think I would even try going even near that lodge at night. Maybe if we're already there and it gets dark is one thing, but trying to approach and go in there like that, I don't know if, everything I've ever been through, you can tell I'm not intimidated. I've got video of being right there and getting hit by a rock, be right in the group. I don't scare out, but I'm also not that stupid either, based on some of the crap we saw in there. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I definitely don't blame you.
I'll have to have you back and you can get into that whole thing, but you guys can learn about it on his channel. And if you'd missed the Sasquatch Chronicles, it's episode 743, I believe. It was the 4th of July show. Am I correct this year?
I'm not sure exactly when he aired it. So that was pre-recorded. So
you guys did 743, I believe, but I'll link that in the description tomorrow, and you should listen to that because it describes this nest of just humongous trees weaved in and out, and I'm in for sure. I'll come this year.
Yeah, and I'm definitely, a lot of people said, "Oh, you're bullshitting, whatever. You're taking pictures, man." They weren't there. What had already happened to us that day, we weren't supposed to be where we were. We were a long way from getting out, and it was getting dark, and it's just one of those things, but I'm absolutely willing to take a team up. That's not the problem. So I have no issue about saying all that to you and then taking you there and saying, see,
no, I'm
sure it's still there. It's nothing. There's nothing going to move it. There's no bulldozers in there. It's going to take it out. So
how long ago was that?
No, what was it? 3-4 years ago? No, how long was that? No, I guess it'd have been 4 to 5 years right now, something like that.
Well, we got to get back up there.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Well, I'm ready, man. You guys start making a plan. Yeah. So the doors open in New Mexico. I will schedule around it.
All right. We will definitely keep you, and we'll definitely talk moving forward. All right. Well, we are going to let Rob go on with his night, and we're going to go on with our night. So I just want to say a big thank you to Mr. Kryder. And, man, I've learned a lot in just the 2 times we talked, and I'm pretty impressed. How about you, John? You got any closing words for Mr. Kryder?
It's just a whole nother level. Just good research, really good information, especially for, people trying to get into this and trying to figure things out. Just pay attention to, that's what I did when I started. I pay attention to guys like that, try to learn what they're sharing and retain it.
Well,
I appreciate it.
Oh no, it's been my pleasure. It's been great talking to both you guys, and Johnny Two Bears. It's been good to meet you and talk to you. I've seen your name, of course, popping up here and there as a follower of our work, and I appreciate that. And we'll just try to do more and more. Hopefully we can do some collaborative work on some broadcasting in the future between Chris, ourselves, and some others. So, more we can get together, the better. But it's been my pleasure, you guys. I really appreciate the outlet. I'm not here for the attention. I couldn't really give a rat's butt. It's important to get I want to say the truth out there. More important, it's get out there how to get to the truth. you know, and just give people what we know, you know, instead of the supposition of what we think, you know. So I appreciate the platform.
All right.
And I've been wrestling. If I've been looking down the whole time, it's because I'm wrestling this guy on my headphone cord. So, he's been playing with Dad's headphones the whole time.
Where'd you put the other one that was up on the table the other night?
She's asleep. But she'd be up here trying to be a TV star. We got her a little deal I call Topaz TV, because when I play video games, she likes to play with the screen, and when I watch racing, same thing. Everything else she doesn't care about, but racing and video like GTA, she really gets into that. So.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you backstage, Rob. Mr. Robert Kryder.
Okay, buddy. Thank you.
All right, Johnny. That was a great show. And I thank you for being here also and helping out.
Yeah, man, I apologize. My camera was not working this evening, but hopefully I have that fixed by the next time. I appreciate you inviting me.
Yeah, it was awesome. You're not very pretty anyway.
Learned a lot. What now?
I said you're not very pretty anyway, so we didn't miss much.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. No,
right,
but I do appreciate you having me on.
Well, thank you for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Johnny Two Bears. All right. Another great show here at Discover Sasquatch. Mr. Robert Kryder was one hell of a guest. And I will link everything we talked about in the bio tomorrow when the video posts live. So make sure you guys go over to his channel and sub and check everything he's got out. Once you hear that Sasquatch running at the Waking the Giant, running through it's going to blow your mind. So, as always, as Larry says, get in the woods, people.